job of yours. It's murder on relationships.
In every Bond movie, there's the gadgets, the quippy villain with a Baroque master plan, and, of course, the Bond girl. Over the decades, 007 has had tons of girlfriends, a few combative sexual relationships, and 2 tragic losses of a woman he actually loved. Many of these women have names that double as sexual innuendo.
My name is Pussy Galore.
I must be dreaming.
Most centrally, the Bond girl exists to confirm the fantasy of a hyper-competent, manly British spy who's irresistible. No matter whether the women he meets are heroes, villains, or something in between, they always want him. Let's dig into the history of Bond girls, the different ways they fit into the formula, and how modern Bond movies have tried to square Bond's heart with his job as a stone-cold killer.
He had to be a pretty cold bastard who didn't want revenge for the death of someone he loved.
If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notified about all our new videos. The most famous articulation of the Bond formula comes surprisingly enough from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory author Roald Dahl. In an interview with Playboy, Dahl recounted the guidelines he received from Bond producers Albert Broccoli and Harry Saltzman before writing You Only Live Twice. There were 2 fixed points in a Bond movie, Bond himself and the quote, girl formula. That formula breaks Bond girls down into a few main types: the sacrificial lamb, the femme fatale, and the heroine.
Which girl do you select?
Let's start with the sacrificial lamb, perhaps the most frustrating type of Bond girl. These are women who fall for Bond, then die as a way of motivating him to complete his mission. This archetype is best exemplified by Jill Masterson in Goldfinger, theatrically murdered by Auric Goldfinger.
She's covered in paint. Gold paint.
Then there's Plenty O'Toole, who literally gets thrown out a window before she's later drowned in Diamonds Are Forever. As Dahl puts it, quote, girl number 1 is pro-Bond. She stays around roughly through the first reel of the picture. Then she is bumped off by the enemy, preferably in Bond's arms. Next, there's the femme fatale, an archetype easily recognizable from other spy stories.
James Bond, who only has to make love to a woman, she repents and immediately returns to the side of right and virtue. But not this one.
These women work with the movie's villain, often as the mastermind's primary minion. Worse still, they often commit the ultimate sin against Bond. They betray him after sleeping with him. And eventually they fight him. The femme fatale is another obstacle for us to watch Bond overcome, whether through violence or through his own charisma.
You don't need the gun, Commander.
That depends on your definition of safe sex.
As Dahl put it, quote, girl number 2 is anti-Bond. She must capture Bond, and Bond must save himself by bowling her over with sheer sexual magnetism. Finally, there's the heroine. These are your classic Bond girls, women who ally with Bond and help him over the course of the movie. Often these women are like Bond, talented operatives who can hold their own in a fight.
Ooh! Yeah, nice moves. Just like Bond.
These women are Bond's equal, or at least something close to it. They don't necessarily save Bond, but they do serve to help him in a crucial moment, and in some cases they fight specifically against the femme fatale. As Dahl put it, quote, girl number 3 is violently pro-Bond. She occupies the final third of the picture, and she must on no account be killed, nor must she permit Bond to take any lecherous liberties with her until the very end of the story. The heroine's withholding of sex until the end of the movie turns her into a kind of prize, delivering what feels like a happily ever after, even though we know that happiness will only last until the next movie, when this Bond girl will be replaced by an exciting new one. So why do all these women love James Bond? Sure, he's hot, but we can find the deeper answer by going back to Dahl's articulation of the formula. All of the elements of a Bond movie exist in relation to Bond himself. The villains have to be scary enough that Bond looks cool defeating them, and the women beautiful enough that Bond looks cool seducing them.
You're one of the most beautiful girls I've ever seen.
I think my mouth is too big.
No, it's the right size. For me, that is.
It's a juvenile fantasy, albeit an appealing one. For James Bond, anything is a woman waiting to be seduced, even a car.
Well, let's see how she responds to my touch, AQ.
Ultimately, these women are puzzle pieces in a decidedly teen boy fantasy. Bond gets to do whatever he wants and acts like a child with everyone he meets. Q tells Bond to
grow up, 007.
but the whole point of James Bond is that he never has to. Where does the Bond girl formula actually come from? Partly, it has its origins in Ian Fleming's original Bond novels and his own life.
Fleming dated Muriel Wright, whom he called Mew or Honeytop, on account of her striking blonde hair, and became the ultimate blueprint for his Bond girls.
Wright was the direct inspiration for the most iconic Bond girl of all, Honey Rider, played by Ursula Andress in Dr. No. Honey Rider's entrance contains all of the DNA of the Bond girl. She's there for Bond to appreciate, a prompt for lurid banter, and above all, an attractive woman for the audience.
Looking for shells?
No, I'm just looking.
And of course, Honey is established as Bond's reward at the end of the movie. This template held for almost all of the original Bond novels and films like Goldfinger, Thunderball, and of course, Dolls You Only Live Twice. These early films also established Bond's casual misogyny as a core part of his charm.
You should be locked up in a cage.
And contain scenes where Bond's idealized masculinity apparently has no need for the Bond girl's consent. No Time to Die director Cary Fukunaga has pointed out that problematic scenes in Goldfinger and Thunderball wouldn't fly today. Like when Pussy Galore turns Bond down repeatedly and attempts to fight him off before he pins her down in a romantic embrace. In the Goldfinger novel, Pussy is also a lesbian, but she eventually says that's because she never met a man before Bond. Fleming wrote in a 1959 letter that she only needed the right man to come along and perform the laying on of hands in order to cure her psychopathological malady. The biggest exception to the early Bond girl formula came in 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the only film to star George Lazenby, when Bond gets married and prepares to give up his life as a spy, only to lose his wife on their wedding day.
She's having a rest.
Bond feels real loss in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but after that the movies veer away from the possibility he might get attached to anyone. Instead, Bond sleeping with the women he meets becomes more a matter of course. As the franchise goes on, the films lean more into the inherent misogyny of James Bond as a character, to the point where he's shocked a woman could be a doctor.
I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
You just found her.
A woman?
Bond's violent confrontations with femme fatale Bond girls continue for decades to be not only expected but highly sexualized.
This time, Mr. Bond, the pleasure will be all mine.
And by the Pierce Brosnan era, the women in Bond films are largely vehicles for sex jokes, as in the case of Dr. Christmas Jones.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
Still, the movies eventually tried to blend the various categories of Bond girl. Consider Mayday, the henchman played by Grace Jones in A View to a Kill. Though she is a villain, Mayday eventually decides to help Bond and is sacrificed because of it. Or Octopussy, a villain turned ally who's so important to the 1983 movie that it's named after her.
So you are the mysterious Octopussy.
While it's easy to write contemporary headlines about a new brand of strong, independent Bond women as a totally new thing, it's also important to remember that throughout the history of James Bond, Bond girls are often, at least superficially, sketched as empowered, capable of handling themselves.
You're quite a man, Mr. James Bond. But I am a superior woman.
The promise of Bond is just that these protests of superiority are almost always false. Women are drawn into Bond's web, while he remains above it all. To sidestep this pattern, the reboot movies instead increase their focus on a surprising Bond woman, one with genuinely more power than Bond himself, his boss, M. Judi Dench had already played Bond's superior M in the Brosnan movies, but the relationship hadn't been fully explored before Daniel Craig put on the tux. Bond and M share mutual affection, a rare emotion in the Bond films. Rather than focusing on an erotic relationship, M's identity as a Bond woman relies on a different set of feminine tropes, which illuminate Bond's essence as a grown-up, disobedient child.
A woman?
Yes. But it's not what you think.
Your mother?
She likes to think so.
Eventually, like the sacrificial lamb from Doll's formula, M dies in Bond's arms, reaffirming their relationship.
I did get one thing right.
And as we've seen in this franchise, the best way for a Bond woman to be empowered is for her to die. Of course, the other not a Bond girl, who's one of the most major feminine presences in Bond's life, is Moneypenny, whose core identity established in the early films is that she's pining for Bond, but tragically for her, can't have him because she's chosen to be a professional.
You never take me to dinner, period.
I would, you know. Only Em would have me court-martialed for illegal use of government property.
Over the years, Moneypenny has morphed to reflect changing norms about what's appropriate flirting and touching in the workplace, while serving, like the Bond girls, to underline Bond's irresistibility.
Flattery'll get you nowhere, but don't stop trying.
She reminds us that not all women get to be so lucky as to have him, while on the other hand only manages to stay around in the story because the attraction isn't consummated. Today's Eve Moneypenny subtly updates the dynamic to be more in line with today's norms of workplace attraction, and to give Moneypenny more of a life outside Bond. In the words of actor Naomi Harris, I think she still has her soft spot for Bond, that's never going to go, but she's an independent woman with her own life.
Was hardly my best shot.
Not sure I can survive your best.
Doubt you'll get the chance.
When Pierce Brosnan stepped down from playing Bond after Die Another Day, Albert Broccoli's daughter Barbara and Eon Productions went back to basics and picked up on an entertainment industry trend. They rebooted Bond. 2006's Casino Royale finds Bond, now played by Craig, at the very beginning of his career, before he's even 007. Casino Royale is an origin story, putting in place many of the pieces of the James Bond mythos, showing how Bond became a cold, womanizing murderer. And the real heart of Casino Royale and of all the Craig Bond movies is Vesper Lynd.
I'm the money.
Every penny of it.
Introduced halfway through the movie as the suit in charge of Bond's funding, Vesper gives as good as she gets, reading Bond's entire personality within moments of meeting him.
By the cut of his suit, you went to Oxford or wherever. I actually think human beings dress like that.
Later on, Vesper saves Bond's life, totally and unequivocally. He needs her in a way Bond rarely needs any of the women who help him.
Thank you.
Eventually, Vesper's ability to see and understand Bond causes him to completely fall in love with her.
Whatever I am, I'm yours.
Casino Royale teases the lie at the end of every Bond movie, that Bond and his lover will have a happily ever after ending.
You love me.
Enough to quit and float around the world with you until one of us has to find an honest job.
Except this time, he does it. For the second time in Bond movie history, he quits his job for love, the first time being for his marriage to Tracy. Then it all comes crashing down, literally, when Bond discovers that Vesper is working with the terrorists, and she dies. Seemingly moments after, Bond has completed his metamorphosis and donned his armor again, this time for good. However, Vesper's death motivates Bond to find her terrorist handler, Mr. White. It's the first time the classic Bond theme music appears in the film, and the first time Bond has appeared as the character we came to know over the course of decades, and it all happens because of this fundamental loss. The primary post-Vesper Bond girl is Camille Montez, an ex-agent of the Bolivian Secret Service. Like Bond, Camille Montez has spent her life in a cold, murderous institution, and now seeks revenge.
I always got the feeling that you were only sleeping with me to get to General Medrano.
Like Bond, she has a complicated relationship with the person motivating her, in this case, her deceased father, rather than Vesper. Ultimately, Camille can't be her own character because she exists to reflect Bond's complex feelings about Vesper back at him. Later on, M confronts Bond with his tendency to manipulate women, which has become even colder since Vesper.
Look how well your charm works, James. They'll do anything for you, won't they?
And when Bond meets other women, like the widow Lucia Scara in Spectre, he is unable to connect with them at all.
How can you talk like this? Can't you see I'm grieving?
And throughout the Craig movies, Vesper is given a history, a sense of why she did what she did, and the ways her choices still affect Bond, to the point where Spectre makes her death part of Ernst Blofeld's master plan to destroy Bond.
Did you think it was coincidence that all the women in your life ended up dead? Vesper Lynd, for example.
She was the big one.
So why is Vesper so important? Her centrality to Blofeld's plan makes it clear that she isn't just any Bond girl, she's all three archetypes in one. a heroine who matches Bond, betrays him, and eventually dies to motivate him to embark on his entire career. And this origin story sets her up as the reason why Bond is only able to relate to women in a few different ways.
Vesper, she gave everything for you. Forgive her.
The Craig movies do what they can to update the formula for our times, objectifying Bond as much as he objectifies women, and giving us female characters whose narrative importance isn't solely tied to an erotic relationship with Bond.
I thought M was a randomly assigned letter. I had no idea it stood for...
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
No Time to Die, the first Bond film in the post-Me Too and Time's Up era, features Léa Seydoux, Ana de Armas, and Lashana Lynch in roles that consciously at least attempt to depart from the Bond girl's past. Lynch's Nomi has inherited the 007 title from Bond himself, making her quite literally the equal that the Bond heroine type is supposed to be, while consciously not sexualizing her. Perhaps most significantly of all, the movie also includes among its writers Phoebe Waller-Bridge, only the second female writer to be credited in the entire franchise's history, and indicating a growing intention to incorporate an actual female perspective into this character. But there's still no getting around the basics of the formula and of Fleming's well-documented chauvinism. The question remains, is it possible to truly move beyond the Bond girl's old-school rules without totally losing the essence of her or of the Bond story structure itself? So long as we keep getting Bond movies, the important question isn't whether Bond girls are empowered, it's whether they're given the same level of depth as Bond himself, rather than simply giving him someone to bounce off of.
Our relationships don't seem to last.
I know the feeling.
The challenge is whether the Bond girl of tomorrow has staying power, the ability to interest us in more than just her relationship to Bond, and the chance to develop her own story.
You think of women as disposable pleasures rather than meaningful pursuits.
This is The Take on your favorite movie, shows, and culture.
Subscribe so you can watch all of our videos.